Okay, so we are live.
We need to turn that orientation up.
We need to turn it up.
We need to turn it up.
Okay, so I'm going to step back and let Ernest do what he do ever so eloquently.
Oh.
I love the way he introduced people, so I'm gonna be quiet now and let you take over.
Oh, that's what's up, baby. All right. Peace. Well, definitely giving peace and recognition to all y'all that's gonna come in or that's in here, brother. You all Yahoo Weirdo Gang. Yeah. But this evening for the show, we have a very special guest, very special guest, a living legend in our time. And I'm just gonna read some of the accolades. And he was a pioneer of the underground consciousness community, established back in 1985, a cultural icon, a social physicist, a literary activist, a spoken word artist, a guerrilla ontologist, a cunning linguist, a symbiologist, and semantic reality hacktivist. Now, for over the past 40 years, he has really been going in, and I mean, he's been putting in that funk. And so, without any further ado, we definitely want to welcome to you the illustrious and amazing teacher, lecturer, just individual. He's a great man. None other than Dr. Gerald Decosta, or better known as Dr. Blynd.
All right. Peace and blessings to you and to your audience and listeners. First of all, would like to give homage to the ancestors, and then open up the dialogue with that in mind. You know, a lot of those things that you've mentioned, you know, I have fun with. In fact, that's the first three letters of the Functionary.
Yeah.
And I was told at one time, ain't nothing good unless you play with it. So, you know.
Right.
I like it.
Hey, that's George Clinton. I can't take it from the Yeah. There's some other words attached to that, but I'll just keep it right there.
Yeah. That's good.
I'll keep it right there.
That's good.
Yeah, so, you know, I guess just to give, without kind of just going directly into it, just a little bit of background. So, my background really is in, I guess, history, comparative religion, metaphysics, and things of that nature. I'm just been on that journey and trajectory for, like you said, a good, well, it's more than 40 years now. But in all honesty, the doctor. I do not have a PhD in anything. I've got a master's in terms of just what I've done myself. Yeah. Dr. Blynd is my nickname, and that's from my basketball days back when I was a teenager and doing my thing on the blacktop.
Yeah.
So I just you know, I like to have fun with things. I like to have be creative with it. So when I came up with the idea for the Functionary and University of Chocolate City, it wasn't any fun just using my regular name. I wanted to do something, so I used my nickname as my pen name. So I just don't want to have any, you know, any misgivings or misunderstandings. That, you know, there's a lot of people come out and they'll say, well, I've got this and I've got this degree or that degree, and I'm not trying to mislead anybody on that, and everybody kind of pretty much knows that, but I just put it on the record anyway. Yeah. So the you know, the Functionary came out as a Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you what inspired you to actually begin the work. I've read where it's about 3 volumes or so that you compiled together, and it was really exhaustive and yet concise at the same time. You know what I'm saying? And so we want to know, share with us what inspired you to actually write a new dictionary. And you know, just my opinion, this is a must-have work. Like, everybody that's going through any type of spiritual journey or spiritual awakening, this is a must-have. You got to have the Functionary in your library.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Ernest. Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question. I would say the inspiration came primarily from my own spiritual sojourn.
Okay.
And also a few inspirational thinkers that Pedro Bell, who was the artist, album cover artist for Parliament Funkadelic.
Okay.
He was really a genius, not just in his art, but in a lot of other things that he would write. He didn't write a book or anything, but it's just really very creative in how he did things. Mm-hmm. Music as well was a very huge inspiration for me to write in the way that I do. Mm-hmm. Writing when it's coming through, let's say, just the top off the dome, is melodic to me. Okay. I don't necessarily try to write in rhymes. Yeah. But for some reason, it just comes that way, regardless of how I try to, do it or not do it. And, sometimes I'm able to kind of do that. So once I started seeing and doing a lot of really research, I found that a lot of things that were written were not really true or valid. And I said, wow, if you look at comparative religion and you find that a whole lot of stuff was just really twisted, and I'm saying to myself, well, shoot, I mean, if comparative religion, if religion is not something that is like hands off for people manipulating, I said all bets are off across the board. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, it was. So when I started delving into ancient history, when I started delving into linguistics, when I started delving into secret societies, metaphysics, Eastern philosophy, the Western occult tradition, there's a thing that I can't remember where it came from, but they say that originality is the art of concealing your source. And a lot of people have looked at the source and have tried to do all that they could to obliterate it from history. And you can kind of see that in a lot of the ways that the Europeans and the Greeks and a lot of other people would try to desecrate things. They would try to do anything, burn books, burn things that would conceal the source, and they try to establish their own provenance as if it were their own. Mm-hmm. Now, if you do enough research, and you'll find that some of the Greek scholars, they admit that everything they got came from Kemet. And so, not to say that everything is necessarily predicated upon the provenance of its originality, but there is something to say about people's intent and their willingness to try to conceal things that should openly be available to anyone. And so that's when you get into latter-day propaganda and conditioning and programming and all the different stuff that we still see going on today through predictive programming and all the different things that we have that we're all aware of now. So I also add that my mother was a literature professor, and so I was also, you know, kind of infused with the love of the letter. Mm-hmm. And even though I was more of an athlete growing up, I just I always retained the love of the letter, and I was I won't say I was taught at an early age, because that was not the case. I found out at an early age that either you master words or words will master you, or you master language or language will master you. It's a master-servant relationship. Yeah. And the quicker you learn to understand how language is used to control and circumscribe our thoughts, then you can have the ability to break through. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell. But I wanted to, I saw that there was nothing really out that would go through in a very meticulous way to put all these things together and to leave it in a way where people who are starting to do their own research, their own inner work, their own spiritual awakening. Is so much information and disinformation out there. I just said, well, you know, if I go ahead and kind of document a lot of stuff that, you know, that I either through research or through experience or just marinating on different things through the wisdom from the experience, if I can put it down, it will save a lot of people a lot of time, because a lot of people will go off in all these different type of tangents or rabbit holes only to find out that it was a trick bag from the start.
That's a great point, because actually I was going to ask you, didn't mean to cut you off, but okay, so your definition of religion, can you break that down for us and for the audience, because this has literally been the biggest issue for us since we were brought over here. To us.
Yeah. So, you know, to really, before I kind of get into defining it, I would like to really just kind of, you know, take a step back and say what our concept of religion, there's really nothing wrong with religion in the sense of its purest essence. Its purest essence is really our seeking to understand the nature of reality. Okay, and to seek things that have that we seem to not have any control of, and things of that nature, and our ability to interact in that environment. So the problem is that when what we understand as revelatory truths, things that have been revealed to individuals, have been written down and have been taken as dogma. So that's when religion, once it goes from a very universal search for the meaning of life, once it takes on the clothing of any type of dogma, then it becomes a very debilitating situation, because what happens is that you deify truth. And that's the problem with religions, because they're all dealing with truth-based reality instead of reality-based truth. So they're thinking that one truth is fighting against another truth, and they are reality blind, and they're just killing each other because they have not come to understand the very nature of reality, which is uncertainty, change, and imperfection, in the sense that it's an ongoing, incomplete scenario. Mm-hmm. So, you know, our clinging to religion as a doctrine is really where we have really fallen off, because what it does is that it cuts off our ability to question. See, that's the key right there. If we cannot question what has been written as someone else's truth, and truths are to be tested, experimented with, and revised. They are not to be deified. Mm-hmm. And so when change is constantly happening, so if you think that truth is anything that's certain, permanent, and not subject to change, that's absolute truth, and it's the worst hoax that you can imagine.
Wow.
Because any truth anything that we take and hold as truth, and to the extent that it implies perfection, certainty, and an unchanging essence, to that extent, it is utter falsehood, because it does not align with the attributes of reality. And the attributes of reality are not something that you have to believe in. It is something that you experience on a second or millisecond to millisecond basis. Uncertainty, change, no one can predict what's going to happen the next second. It's all uncertain. But the flip side of uncertainty is freedom. And so, that in and of itself is the beautiful part of it, is that just because something is uncertain, we shouldn't fear it. And so what happens is that religion puts us in a situation where we fear change, because we are worshiping the truth. And law is only, or man-made law, is only a deification and codification of truth. So what we have is, we end up having, through truth, through dogma and religion, and then through statutes and law, what we have is we have a situation set up where we are no longer able to grow through our experiencing and testing these things and making changes, because growth only happens through our expansion of awareness.
So is this why when we try to discuss religion versus spirituality with the average person, it's upsetting, overwhelming, and confusing? And in the book, in your book, you said that religion was a social control experiment created around the intellectual debris of both real and imagined social misfits. Wow. So so basically this is ancient social engineering?
You got it in a nutshell. You have gone from understanding to innerstanding in a heartbeat.
Ashe.
Yeah. And see therein is the I've had some people to ask me to say, hey, look, you know what? This is a lot of information. This is great, man. I mean, I'm just, I'm really excited and overwhelmed and all of that kind of type of stuff. And they say, well, have you created like something to help kind of, guide through like a guidebook for the functionary? And I said, well, I've thought about that a lot. But here's the thing, is that there is benefit in every individual coming to understanding things on their own without the color of commentary to do that.
You know what, that right there, what you just said, brings up another definition, another term, and that's the difference in a master and a master.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That was so big. Yeah.
Could you break down the difference between the two? Give us a simplified breakdown, if possible. The difference between the two.
Yeah, sure. So, a master is someone who has really taken the time and has done all of the preparation around a particular subject matter, if you will. They are, they have taken the information and, let's say, what's the best way of really trying to make the differentiation?
Because the difference that you used was the E and the A, right? One had the E. Okay.
It is a play. It is kind of a play on a semantic play.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, a master teacher is one who has become so attuned to the infinite state that he cannot possibly be a part of that which is unaligned with the attributes of reality and the divine.
Wow.
And so there's a kind of the better understanding is a master has basically taken the information and has made it vertical. In other words, they have incorporated it into their being, if you will. So it's not a situation of something that they espouse. It's something that they are, something that they live. It's not something that they just know.
Okay.
One thing that stuck out, and I found it said a major distinction between a master and a master is that a master is susceptible to following his own followers by fulfilling their expectations of him.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So it sounds like to me that what you're saying is that some Christian pastors have the potential to be masters, but they fall into the construct of the church, and so they become servants to the people they're serving. So they may undoubtedly know the truth, the more metaphysical truth, but they're teaching it that way because it feeds the ego, the spiritual ego, to and
it falls in line with the status quo of that particular religion.
Yes, I mean, to the point, I mean, I've had discussions with a few reverends. I won't call their names, not that you would know them, but similar
to Reverend Creplow. Crap your dollar.
Well, no, he's just they're just pimping religion. I mean, I'm talking about some other folks that really are not at that level, but they have a certain level. They have a certain level of integrity about them, but they have come to understand that what they're teaching is not really it's nourishing individuals' desire to be pacified and given a false sense of emotional security.
The ego.
Wow.
Yeah.
So basically, religion, as you say, it's for the young in consciousness who are not ready to spiritually mature enough to edit their own truths, nor ready to trust their own authenticity for unfoldment as divinity.
That is it.
My goodness. I mean, that's a mouthful right there, and that's very true. Because of this, you also compare it to being the methadone for the masses. And what we have found, being Ernest went through withdrawal when we came out of religion. We went through grief. We went through stages as if we had experienced a death of a loved one.
And that's because that is because the level of authenticity that you all had, it will cause that, because again, you were emotionally tied to something that you held to be true. And it was a death of a understanding that, you know, that you just really, at that point, you didn't have anything, and I'm making an assumption here in a general sense because of just the nature of grief. You didn't have anything right then and there that could necessarily replace it. It's just that you knew that this was something that you had transcended, and you just not know, you're unsure as to what the next move, you know.
That's very true. We didn't have a replacement for anything.
Right.
But
you know what though, we kind of we definitely went through stages, like Cam said, we went through stages of where it seemed like we was all over the place. But one thing that we did do is we began to basically tear down all that we had learned, so basically unlearn to learn again. You know what I'm saying? And so
absolutely. Yeah. A lot of people do not understand the importance of unlearning, and we need to be just as eager in our unlearning as our learning. Because here's the thing: when you take emotional, when you have identified yourself as something or with something, if you come to find out that was a mirage, or that did not really, it was not based anything that's really kind of based in reality, what happens is that you will go through, you know, those types of those levels of grief and, you know, disbelief and all of the different, you know, stages that you go through in the process of grieving. But most people, you know, as I mentioned, there are mostly two types of people: those that want to be pacified and given like an emotional, false sense of emotional security. I call it the binky of belief. You know, you just put the binky in the mouth, and you know, with the belief, yeah. And whatever convictions that you may have that you hold on to, you know, the stronger that you hold on to them, the more misguided and the more the more misguided you're going to be. Convictions causes convicts. What you believe will imprison you.
Wow.
And what it will do is, in that imprisonment, you build that prison with bars of belief. And to the extent that you are complacent with just wanting to feel secure, but not have any knowingness, you know, it's just not a wise or intelligent place to be. Because you know, you might as well believe in, you know, the tooth fairy or you know, any of these other things. I mean, you know, the great pumpkin that Charlie Brown and them believed in, and all of that kind of type of stuff. I mean, it almost doesn't matter what you believe in, because belief is a con game.
Yeah.
And it's set up so that you cannot prove it nor disprove it. You cannot disprove, you know, something that doesn't exist. So it becomes a means for people to feel special in their ignorance.
Wow.
So
it's a salve. It's a salve to them.
Yeah.
And at the time when we were given that, we probably really needed a binky. At the time, we was getting our ass beat and getting raped and whooped. So, you know, you would have took anything that made you feel better, which is what makes the programming so deep, is that it was backed up with trauma. It was based in trauma.
That's true. Yeah, especially if you speak about how it was introduced to us, to our ancestors right here in America, right? Especially, right?
So that leads us to the creation. Okay, so what resonates for you? Because me and Ernest still don't fully understand the creation story. We went from the book of Genesis to the coming forth by day, a lot of ancient Kemet text, and we still quite don't understand. There's this Enki Enlil, there's Jehovah, there are the Anunnaki, there are so many different legends. Do you have a creation story that resonates as true for you, or is it more metaphorical, all of the creation stories, for something else?
Yeah, they're all metaphorical stories. One thing that you, once you get further into understanding the nature of reality, you understand that there's no such thing as limits or objectivity. The illusions of objectivity create, or they bring two sides of a truth to keep it in place as if though it was something that is real. However, the very nature of reality is subjectivity. It is, in fact, if you really think about it, the moment of now, at any point you want to just stop and just say, right now, as you are looking or observing at anything, by the time that your brain is cognizant of what you are observing, it is already in the past. So consciousness is the only thing that can take something that exists in the dream past and for us to process it as if though it was happening in real time. So what I'm getting at is that the moment, the instant of change is too fleeting for anything to exist within it. So time is a human construct. It doesn't exist in reality. So what we have is, a combination of really, and this would take a long time to really kind of get into, so I won't do it right now. There's a combination of creation and evolution. It's not a either or situation. But one thing that has to be understood, that it is all subjective. They are dreams of consciousness. They are cosmic adventures. They are not absolute objective realities. Reality is totally subjective. And so you have to get into understanding the very nature of consciousness to understand that. See, in the physics and academia, a lot of the academics are still thinking that consciousness is a byproduct, an epiphenomenon of brain activity, when in reality, consciousness is totally a subjective phenomenon, and that it actually is the consciousness and matter are two flip sides of itself. It's like taking, for instance, the deeper understanding is called existential self-relation. So it's like, to put it at a very common, where you could maybe begin to grasp it. If you take a rubber band, and as it is in a circle, and then anything that is just existing as let's say a circle, it has nothing to experience itself. If you take that rubber band and twist it like a Mobius strip, all of a sudden you have an aspect of itself to reflect back upon itself, to experience itself as it is. And so that's what we really have. Consciousness is the creator, if you will, of all that we experience. But at the end of the day, that's all that it is. We are consciousness. we exist in consciousness. Consciousness creates, it evolves, and it is infinite. And it is really existential self-relation. It is existence or consciousness, or you could say God, universal consciousness experiencing itself. And we are the avatars through which that happens.
So, okay. So
all of those stories, they're just different metaphors for some I think are a little more accurate than others, but they still are only metaphors for this thing that I'm telling you about, because all there is consciousness. So however you want to, however you want to start or where you want to start, it's kind of up to you, but you can't get behind or beyond consciousness.
Okay, so if that's the case, then what is your perspective of the devil or Lucifer?
Well, as it pertains to in the Bible, I mean, the devil is simply an adversary. Anything that is an opposition to you. It doesn't necessarily mean anything that's necessarily devious or non-beneficial. Something that is opposing you and can be a means for you to improve yourself. You can look at it at many different ways. The problem is when we take these things and anthropomorphize it, like we do the concept of God. And so if you depersonalize these steps, then you can it becomes more of a means for you to grow as a growth factor as opposed to that is evil. I'm not saying that certain things don't have that are negative, but what I'm trying to get at is that by taking them from the Bible and trying to use them in the way in which they have been depicted or characterized does us no justice.
Yeah.
Anything that is being used for us for our growth and awareness, and to a great awareness, we should look upon that as, it's a function. Certain things will inhibit us from growth, and certain things will facilitate it. But we have to get out of this whole notion of these biblical stories and understand the deeper essence of the metaphors, parables, analogies that are within them. Because you have the writings are for two different sets of people. Those are the ones that use their own bodies and minds, their body-mind complex, as laboratories for themselves. Those are the ones that are going to grow. If you go into a store and say, okay, well, I'm gonna buy this belief and I'm take it off the shelf and whatever, there's no growth in belief.
Because there's no room for editing, right?
No room for editing. No room for change. No room for none of that.
That's the way we've been doing it, and we're going to keep doing it like this because that's the way it's been given to us.
That's correct. Right.
That's some dangerous stuff. So how would you say that affected the relationship between the black man and the black woman?
Yeah.
The whole language thing, the syntax, the way we relate with one another. We saw a breakdown of the black family. And so I was just telling Ernest, like, I'm always wanting him to mind screw me. in a way that I didn't see coming. And it's challenging for him, and he's really swift with his words. I don't know, but we find these kinks that we run into within our relationships, and when we observe other cultures who did not have their language taken away from them the way we did, we do see a difference, and we can't help but wonder, does it have something to do with the construct? Are there issues with the way we interface with one another within this language because of this? What is your take on that?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question. It's a wide topic, but one of the things is one of the major differences, and this has nothing right now to do with language, is that men love from the outside in, and women typically love from the inside out.
Wow.
And with that, obviously the attractiveness, the whole eye candy and all this other kind of type of stuff, or what level of kind of frequency or vibe, and I'm doing, a lot of that. The men are, are visual. We are visual in nature. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the start is. Now, one of the problems that we encounter, I still don't think language per se is getting in the way, but ultimately you have men who, when they really are looking at love, they're looking at something that is from a romantic kind of type of place.
Okay.
And a man wants to protect. And to protect, man has to own. He has to feel that he owns what he's protecting. The problem is that we are not, as light states of being, we're not to be owned by anyone. Even our children, they come through us. They're not our own. Mm-hmm. We love them, mm-hmm. and we care for them, and we take care of them. But as many people will attest to, as many parents will attest to, someone like, well, I don't know where he came from, or I don't know where she came from. Not mm-hmm. like either, myself or their mom, or mm-hmm. That kind of type of thing, because we all have, we all come here with different experiences in our DNA. Mm-hmm. So I would go back to say that we really need a reorientation to our understanding what the nature of love and relationship is, in order for us to be able to better navigate healthy and nourishing relationships. I don't think that it is a respect issue, even though I think some of that has to do with it, but it really comes down to how men and women, how we are constructed, both in our anatomy and our psychosexual composition, and how there's the difference in that, and then really trying to come to a means by which you can be authentic with each other, because it doesn't make a difference let me put it to you this way. Also, this is a major component. We all have to become more integral in our own selves and our own understanding of the nature of self, because what's happening is that you're having people who have not done the inner work, who have not done the greater work on themselves. They don't even know themselves. Right. So they don't even have a relationship, a proper or understanding relationship with the nature of self. There certainly can't be any lasting or any real nourishing and lasting relationship with another person, because you still have not aligned with the divine within yourself. So there's a whole lot of people. So when when two people come together, what happens is that you have one persona is you have your agent or your representative talking on your behalf. Then you become a little more vulnerable, and then you have two egos talking to each other. Then once you get past that, then you can get to another layer of understanding or another layer of vulnerability with a person. And at the end of the day, if you love someone, it cannot be a demand on reciprocity. It's not a contract. It's like, I love you if ... Many women fall into that. Unfortunately, I will love you if, whatever that contract or whatever that ... terms are involved. But that's a contract. That's a business. That is not love. Love is what you do for someone without even the anticipation of it being given in return.
Wow, that's deep. So since a lot of us came through religion, then we didn't have a relationship with ourselves, because we weren't taught to. We were taught to worship outside of ourselves and honor divinity outside of ourselves. Right. So I can also see the connection how religion potentially
can cause
could cause some of the demise within relationships with people who haven't went on a journey of self-discovery.
Right. Yeah, I cannot highlight or underline and emphasize how important it is for people to do their own inner work. And you don't have to, let's say, start from scratch. I mean, obviously, if you're already in a relationship or marriage or whatever, it will be best if both are on that journey. And here's the thing: is that you don't ever have to be necessarily on the same page, but you have to be authentic. You have to be open to modifying your truths, and you have to be open to unlearning, so that a lot of the things that that you thought that you had identifications with, you can release those and slough them off. And it's more important for the man and woman to be open to each other, and because everybody's at a different level. Even those that have awakened are at different levels of spiritual unfolding. And it may not seem that way, but it really is, because no two people are going to be exactly where each other are in that unfoldment. But you have to, at the same time, be open to wherever someone is. See, it's more important to be open and vulnerable than it is to be saying we have to be on the same page with something. Because you're just not going to come to the same realization at the same time. It's just not going to happen.
We get that a lot. People ask us that a lot. Like, what do we do? Our relationship, I would like for it to be much like you and Ernest, where you're on this journey together. Like, I feel like it's just me. My wife don't want anything to do with any of the stuff that I'm drawn to. People, we get that a lot. And that was one of the main things. It's good to hear this from you, because one of the main things for us was I kind of came along a little further before he did. And so I had to make a decision. Do I want to stay with him and allow him to go through his process in his own timing and honor that? Or should we not be together? Because I had already started the journey of self much deeper than he had, because I had already began separating myself from the church, which was holding my consciousness hostage. And so once we got through that was a tough time making that decision, because at some point you can look at your mate and be like, well, damn, they may not ever come to the level of realization that you have. But if you can find a way to honor the love that you have for each other, which is a lot of people use the term love and unconditional love, but many people aren't willing to really pay the cost of that.
That's true, and that's what I'm saying, and that's why when I said like I'll love you if ... if you're not paying, you know, the price, then you know, then that person will say, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to, let's say end the relationship and go find something else. But you know, as they say, you know, wherever you go, there you are. The grass is not greener on the other side. The grass is green where you nourish it. Mm-hmm. So, where you water it. So, you know, it comes down to, do I really want to, do I think that I have, here's the important part. Is your mate, do you feel that he or she has the ingredients for you to move forward with?
Okay. What would you say the fundamentals are for us?
And so that means essentially you have to come to the understanding up front to say, if he or she never gets to the most basic next level understanding that I have, can I still, or do I want to be with this person? And see, it's nice to have someone at your level of consciousness, but it doesn't have to be that way. They only have to be open, right? They only have to be open to entertaining and supporting your own growth.
Okay.
And so that would again come easier for the spiritually mature, because you're able to hold some space. And it is a conscious choice that you're deciding whether or not you're going to, like you said, you're going to endure through it. But it requires a spiritually mature individual to say, hey, you know what? You're not where I am. But it goes back to, but you know what? I see something in you. That's the ingredient part. I see more in you than what I see right now. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
I
exactly.
can see deeper into it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and that's a discernment that can only be made between the two individuals, or the person that's really, you know, in that. And in any relationship, if it's like unequal in terms of how much someone may be giving of themselves, you know, the person who cares less in the relationship has the most power in that relationship until it's really, you know, it either grows or dissolves.
Oh my goodness. That right there just, yeah, that's a difficult one. So
it is. And with that being said, you know, ultimately you just really have to kind of, you know, if to the extent that you know the person, you kind of, after a while you will kind of know whether or not your evolution in consciousness is something, if it's that important for your mate to be near where you are. You don't have to be on the same page, but you have to be in the same book. Now, and I'm saying book metaphorically, because I'm not talking about scripture. I'm talking about the book of life.
It's good that you mentioned that. Okay, so now that you bring up the book of life, what is your interpretation of the Akashic records? How does that fit into this?
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of that has to do with just the individual themselves, and maybe not even necessarily with the relationship, as we're talking about relationships right now. We all come with imprints from past adventures. You can call them past lives, you can call them whatever you would like to call them, but when we do come here, that's why, you know, all of a sudden somebody is just at 2 or 3 years old as a musical genius. It's like, where did that come from? It's not. We don't come here what they call tabula rasa, clear slate.
Yeah.
We bring and I think epigenetics is really giving a lot of insight into some of the stuff that I'm talking about. But in any event, we come with a certain amount of imprints in our DNA, aptitudes, propensities, things of that nature, traumas, all of that stuff. And whether or not, you just don't know until you start doing the inner work. For some people, it's very liberating. Some people, it's very taxing and very challenging. I mean, they, go through all kinds of, dark night of the soul and all kinds of stuff, and maybe not even one time. As you embark into another stage of consciousness, because there's a difference between states of consciousness and stages of consciousness. A state of consciousness is something that's a peak, that you have a peak insight on, but once that peak insight is achieved, you fall back into whatever stage of consciousness you are. Whereas when you actually elevate to another stage of consciousness, you don't go back. It's like going from belief to knowing.
Wow. So wait a minute. So you
wait a minute.
wait a minute. I'm trying to wrap my mind around that one. Hold on. Okay. So lately we've been noticing a lot of people who came into the conscious community or studying esoteric, Gnostic texts, occult, are going back to religion. They're going back to Jesus. So as I'm listening to you say that, I'm like, okay, they must have reached a peak in consciousness, and then eventually they return back to the state of consciousness in which their baseline is in alignment with.
So they reached the state, but they didn't move to the next stage.
That's correct, because there's a difference between states of consciousness and stages of consciousness.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we definitely are some fresh Moors in the University of Chocolate City. I tell you that. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Wow.
I love it.
Yeah. So we're going to open up the Q&A. If anybody have a question on here, if you could just post it. And if anybody has a question on here, I guess you could do the same thing, or you can actually raise your hand. And if it's okay, we'll bring you on and let you ask him your question. I'm going to give y'all a minute to do that. And while y'all do that, we're going to let him, he may answer your question, because this is one of the questions that we received from some of our tribe.
Yeah.
So someone asked, and I thought this was a really unique question. They wanted to know, regarding the pandemic with COVID-19, is this serious? Is it a hoax? Is it staged? What is happening? And what do you believe will be the outcome economically in the United States?
And then that'll lead to another question that I had that I want you to address too.
Okay, all right. So first of all, with no disrespect to the person that's asking it, I don't market in belief. So it's something I either know or whatever I'm going to tell you. It's either something that I know or don't know. And it's important to understand and to try to get people to really stop using what somebody will believe, because that never gets you anywhere. But with that being said, it's a great question. So who's ever answering it, don't take offense to it. I'm just trying to educate as we go. So the pandemic, what we've got is, yes, it's real. The virus is real. It is not a hoax, but the agenda behind it is very real. The agenda behind it has always been the depopulation of non-favorite people on the planet. Okay, so, and non to any number of their plans, and economic decimation is one of them. The depopulation is another one. Governments have long been working on biological warfare, biological and chemical warfare. And so it's nothing should be no surprise to anyone that weapons of mass destruction can be either inadvertently or deliberately let out on the people. But the real nefarious part is that with a virus, it becomes, more, it's not like they're just, taking these big atomic bombs or tanks and just shooting people all over the place. It's a very insidious and very imperceptible way of doing it, and it has a lot of different types of benefits for the people that are trying to do it. I mean, when you're talking about predictive programming, and you're talking about the whole thing of getting people to let's say, for instance, like when you're going in and getting your temperature checked in these any place where they're taking, and they take this white thing that looks like a gun and it points it right to your pineal gland, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, it's we should. It's so many different things at so many different levels that are happening. From a medical standpoint, you get a better reading if you actually point the gun, point the whatever the reader. I don't see. It's already got me saying the gun.
That's what it looks like.
I mean, that's how deep the programming is.
Yes.
If you take the reader, the sensor, and point it to the inside of your wrist, it takes a better, more accurate measurement. But in any event, all of that to say that it is not hoax. It is real. And they create these biological weapons for destruction and for people to be killed as a means of national defense. But what happens is that the people who sit behind governments, and the intergenerational dynastic families, they are the one that fund all of these different operations, and they are the ones that actually, their agenda is what gets rolled out on people. And so, I've said all of that to say that it is real. It is a weapon of mass destruction. It was deliberate, and there are going to be a lot of economic consequences. They're trying to do a lot of different things from the standpoint of your ability to exchange and the whole thing about cash or cashless society. But that's a whole other thing, because if you understand, once you do a deep dive into the nature of cash, you understand that if you wait for the advent of a cashless society, you will never recognize its presence, because we've lived in a cashless society since they demonetized gold and silver in 1933 and 1967. And so pieces of paper or notes of indebtedness are not cash. They were always simply a promise to pay the cash. So we've been in a cashless society since they demonetized gold and silver. And so all we deal now is with credit, and credit comes from the Latin word credere, which means to bleed.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm sorry to go through all that, because a lot of the stuff is intertwined. So to the brother and sister who answered the question, who asked the question, I'm sorry I went around robbing his barn, but at the same time, there are a lot of things that are rolled up into that. So I wanted to just hit the major points. Well,
we definitely gonna have to do this again, but we do got a couple more questions, and we're not gonna hold you for the time. One being, can you talk to us, seeing that how you just dealt with that one? Can you talk to us about the sets, the currency exchange, the system? Can you? Man,
I'm gonna tell you that's a whole show. I'll tell you this much. I'll go into it this way.
Okay.
All right. Whoever creates the symbol that acts as a claim on your productive energy, wealth, or capacity owns that energy, wealth, or capacity.
Okay. So sounds like what you're saying is, to truly tap into abundance, you need to be informed on the energetic system.
That's correct. So from a practical standpoint, the government was not, by their own laws, were restricted from creating money out of thin air. In the Coinage Act, actually in the Constitution, it says that Congress shall have the power to coin money. Okay, coin money simply didn't mean create. Create means emit bills of credit, and that was stricken out of the Constitution. To create, to coin money, what happened was gold and silver was being used as money, and so people who owned gold or silver would go to the mint. They would assay it for its purity and fineness, stamp it in a uniform way, and give it back to the owner. So that meant that only the people who had gold and silver actually had money.
Yeah.
So here's two things. Also, the banking institutions were, by law, are not allowed to create unearned symbolic value, which is credit. Yeah. They're not allowed to do it, but they have gotten by it because people do not understand the nature of exchange money and credit. And until such time that there's enough people who understand. So if banks are not able to create, because I'm going back to the same point that I made. If government cannot create money out of thin air, banks cannot create money out of thin air because it would be fraudulent. Why? Think about this. If I have something and I'm loaning it to you, if it's a loan, if it's a real loan, I have one less of what you have one more of. I'm losing something because you have one more. I'm giving something of substance, something tangible up. But credit is intangible. I can pretend that I'm loaning you any amount of anything on a number, but I don't have any less of anything because it's just a number and a symbol.
Mm-hmm.
So if banks are not allowed to do it, and if government is not allowed to do it, that means that it should fall to the people that actually create wealth, who sell their labor, produce a good, or produce a service. Only the people that actually produce value should be able to create the symbols that act as claims on their own productive capacities. Mm-hmm. Why should somebody be able to just create something out of thin air and give it to you and have you pay the principal and pay interest on top of that?
Yeah,
that's robbery.
Yeah, it's robbery, right? And they charge you interest to sustain the illusion that what you thought they loaned to you had value to begin with when it didn't.
Right. And so that's why
it's intangible. Because it's intangible. It is not anything that they are loaning you.
Mm-hmm.
It's all credit. If you look in the Federal Reserve, bulletins and the books, the Federal Reserve works only with credit.
Mm-hmm.
And credit is intangible. How much belief do you want me to loan you today?
Wow.
Yeah, and that's the reason when I was reading into that, I was like, wow, we hadn't seen a system as what you mentioned about the sets, with the best of my knowledge, except for before money was even an institution, before money was even something that was used. And because we're seeing what's happening with our monetary system, and then the fact of new systems coming into play with bitcoins and cryptocurrency and things like that, that was interesting. The whole sense.
Well, the trick bag around cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin is that they are really not. It's an outdated or discredited concept using 21st century technology. They're still pretending like they are mining something, creating artificial value, when in reality it's not. You're still having to buy it. Okay. But what are you buying it with? You're buying it with intangible credit that's being created out of thin air by the banks and the government. Okay. And in tandem. Yeah. Yeah. So, and then on top of that, they're using so much power and stuff with this computing power to come up with mining and coming up with answers to things that have nothing to do with an exchange. We were exchanging before barter even came around. Okay. And so we have to, the first book I ever wrote was on the nature of money. This was back in 1996. And it was called An Encyclopedia on the Sleight of Mind Called Money. Mm-hmm. Not a sleight of hand, but a sleight of mind called money. Yes. Free your mind and your assets will follow. Mm-hmm. And I'll probably want to reprint that book because it's more, back then it was only a handful of people that were kind of, interested or could kind of see that, we are being controlled through the system, through this monetary system or the system credit system. Oh, yeah. And so now so many people, are understanding the different things. But cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and all that kind of type of stuff is really, it's no different than going back to pretending to use gold and silver as, in other words, you would have a repeat of history if you use Bitcoins and the other things. What we really need is a trick bag. What we really need is, and there's already things out there. I mean, I was a pioneer in the alternative complementary currency, groups back in the early 90s. So, I saw this thing, a long time ago, and actually came up with a currency system for the African American community called Africash. Right. So, right. But in any event, that's a whole show.
We're definitely gonna have to do that show.
I don't think we may not realize the magnitude and wealth of information and knowledge that Dr. Blynd possess and pass on to us, but man, that's why I say we are, and I'll say we are masters and masters. That's right. In the whole process of learning. Yeah,
that's right.
Because one of our followers, her name is Ashley. Well, one of our tribe members. I don't like to call people followers, but she asked, had you considered reviving the Afrocash specifically? So if we could, maybe we could do another show and just go into the economic portion of this, because a lot of people,
that's what we need.
I think we need that right now more than ever, especially because the ancestors, as an oracle, the ancestors come through with messages sometimes that are way outside of my consciousness. And I'll do the research, and I'm like, this is, oh my goodness, okay, this is alignment. I know that you are speaking this to me. And so lately, that has been the conversation. You all are elevating yourselves in consciousness, but you have yet to unravel the trickery around money, credit system, the whole banking system, and the way that that's set up. Your souls basically are still, it's almost like a recycling process, and like siphoning energy by us not fully understanding these principles. So if we could do another show, because a lot of our tribe members, they're more interested in how the hell do we get out of this? What information can you give us to at least get us started on getting out of this? Because we are watching the death of the dollar like never before.
Right.
you know, and you can't even get change anymore.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, here's the upside of it is that the whole thing about it's going to get worse before it gets better, but there will be a change. The upside of it is that the whole thing about, you know, people not being able to buy or sell unless they have the mark and all that kind of type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That was really like, you know, kind of an insight. But here's the thing. It is a defeatist and it's a pessimistic way of looking at things because, again, there's nothing, if you really think about it, whether you're talking about buildings, bridges, any type of infrastructure, no piece of gold, no piece of credit, or no piece of paper ever built it.
Right.
It was intellectual ingenuity and resources and the time and the skills towards actually doing it.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So as long as we are the source of that, we can always create the means through which we create value and share that, regardless of who considers themselves to be in a position to see. The trick bag with money is just thinking that you have to use somebody else's system, because ultimately the whole thing of the monetary concept is the mathematical relativity of value. And so that means that simply is that as long as we create value, we can create the systems of accountancy that hold us accountable for the things that we actually produce of value and things that we actually exchange from each other, and we can keep our own ledgers without having to worry about anybody else. And some of that stuff is already going on. Some things that I'm still working on behind the scenes, but we can get into that. I'll probably end up doing a reprint or an update of the book that I wrote back in 1996.
Yeah.
And since more people, it's more relevant now than it was back then.
You definitely were ahead of your time,
Exactly.
and you know that's typically what happens.
The whole function.
It does. There's I mean that's true in a lot of ways, but man, I just wish that more people could have been able to be on
their page.
on the page. I just didn't think it was going to take 30 years for to kind of come to this, but yeah, we're at that point, and you know, I can certainly help facilitate people in a pretty fast way to kind of get up on understanding the nature of exchange and the monetary system, and you know how all of that. But you said it, Cam. You said it very eloquently with regards to the term that I have in the functionary is called cultural induction, and it's vampiring our energy.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Like, okay.
That's
we
the
make
whole
a note
point.
of that?
Yeah.
So we definitely got to do a part 2, because we had one other question which was actually pertaining to that word and definition that we didn't get a chance to get to. Is it okay if we ask you one more question before we get off from the viewers?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So, I Dream of Black Queens commented and said, what are the metaphysical effects of gentrification? How does he view the erasure of variety of cultures and languages via the new world that is being swiftly built, transforming our hoods into Whole Foods? What's really happening underneath face value?
Wow, that's a very deep question, and that's a whole lot to unpack.
You can give us a sample version.
Yeah, give us the abbreviated version.
Man, I'm going to tell you, I'm trying to figure out which ones. Okay, so first of all, it is a very accurate phenomenon that she's describing. there are a lot of factors that are going into why we're seeing what's unfolding. One of the things that I can say is that without a means by which we can control our communities, and again, Malcolm, this is a question that Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey primarily wanted to really deal with, and probably more currently Dr. Claude Anderson with his Powernomics. But we have to control our communities because we don't really have them. You know, I think Dr. Anderson rightly says, you know, we only have, you know, hoods now. We have, you know, we don't know our neighbors. We don't have, we don't have the infrastructure in place for us to actually create community. And in order for us to be able to turn the tables and to stop all of the gentrification that she's aware of, that she speaks of, is that it has to start with us being able to create systems of exchange between us, because, you know, you should only support institutions that in turn support you. Why would you ever go to some place that won't ever support your community?
True.
Why would you do that? Well, it's because, well, now it's convenience, because we don't have any stores. We don't have any places in the hood to go here or go to do that. So, you know, it's a complicated thing to unpack, but I would say the kernel of it is that we have to create our own monetary system or systems of exchange where we place and create value on our own productive capacities and goods and services. Then we have to create the economic structure, then the political structure, then the social structure. There's a means by which this house or this community or this fabric and this infrastructure needs to be created. And as long as we, I depart with Dr. Anderson on, he starts with the economics, but really even deeper than that, as long as we're using somebody else's system of exchange, they're robbing us without us even realizing.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so we have to really start with creating, administering, and owning our own systems of exchange so that we are not robbed blind without us being even able to perceive the fraud and the robbery that's taken place. And I think it was John Maynard Keynes who said in the book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, about the banking system or the banking structure or the monetary system, that only 1 in a million can actually understand or decipher how your value, labor, and wealth is being stolen from you through the very use of the system that you use. And he wrote that back in 1934, 35,
wow.
In the late 30s. And this is one of the major economists, Keynesian economics. So, yeah, but it's but yeah, it's a lot to unpack, sister. But I can tell you the only way that if you address the kernel, all of the ancillary types of issues will resolve themselves. But it starts with creating our own systems of exchange, our own businesses, our own circular economies. We got to transition from linear to circular economies and the like. It's a lot to unpack in that statement, but she was so very on point with that.
Yeah, it feels like because it seems like a huge task, and it is. It's a big task. We've been trying to get back to that point by doing things like susus, gifting groups, getting into groups with like-minded people. And, basically, I'm sure you've heard of a susu, but the Caribbeans use it. Africans, just a system of giving money, and basically from week to week, someone different that gifted to be within the group will be able to receive that lump sum of money from each person who invested into the bucket, let's just say.
Right.
But we've been having a difficult time, especially the very first time. It seems like the distrust that we have towards each other is a reflection of the self-hatred and the bad programming, within our consciousness, because we're quicker to give our money to someone outside of our culture, outside of our community, outside of our race, just being honest, outside of our family. We will give them money and not really even question anything, not even question, why does this cost that much? We'll go and buy an iPhone for $1,200 and not really even care about the semantics of what all you're going to be able to do. But we would ask people, $500 is all it takes to participate in this. And people would be like, $500? Like, what? I ain't even never heard of a susu. And a lot of people are like, it's a scam. Don't do it. And I'm like, the whole system we've been in is a scam. What do you mean?
What are you talking about? Right. Yeah. Yeah, the distrust is real. And so when you can create a system that I'm telling you about, that's transparent, that everybody can kind of see, once the transparency will eradicate the distrust.
Yeah. You know what? We have a great responsibility on our hands, and it was a term in the Functionary. You called it winistries, and that's exactly where we are. Where we trying to help pull people out of some of these old thought forms and begin to really know ourselves. But like you said before earlier, when you get to doing the inner work, it will, it's like a flower. It will bloom, and all the other areas of our lives will be affected and bettered.
Yeah, that's true, because it ripples throughout all aspects of your life. That is absolutely true.
Yeah.
Okay, one other thing, and this really got me thinking. So, recently we have been on this divine feminine aspect of learning how to embrace that, cultivate that, nurture that. We've saw the demonization of the woman, the demonization from the story of Eve to the story of Jezebel. Even the story of Mary, Jesus' mother, wasn't all positive. He even called her a woman and act like he didn't know who she was. And then told the disciples, I'm only family with people who about my Father's business. And so you can see a lot of disrespect within a lot of the religious things. The undertones of that was something that was very segregating between the divine portion of the man and the woman. And so it seems that creation force, that energy that we call source, it seems to be more of a feminine principle that it operates on. I know it's both. It has to be, because we're both and we're a reflection of source. So with that being said, is there any advice that you could give to men in dealing with a woman who has awakened to the divine feminine part of herself? Because when I started walking in more of a goddesshood and carrying myself that way, and only putting the things in my temple that were worthy of being in my temple, my consciousness, guarding my ear gates, when I started doing all of that, it detoxified me to a point where there was an increase in our income. And I was just like, wait a minute, this must be a system here. As I'm rebalancing, the income is getting better. And so I'm just wondering, is some connections there? So is there anything, because a lot of men still feel like, I don't want to be getting played, I don't want to be a trick, I don't want to be giving her my money. And the people who are married still function in these principles, people who have been together a long time. So what could you lend to the young man coming behind you and dealing with a conscious woman, or even maybe an unconscious woman, since time isn't really a thing, it's just a human construct? She may become a goddess or a queen later. Is there any advice that you could give for men in dealing with women?
The first thing I would have to say is patience and compassion. Even before understanding. Because understanding can only come through you letting your guards down for acceptance.
Or rejection?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Even the whole thing of forgiveness is not even optimal, because when you're talking about forgiveness, you're still taking a side that says that I was right and you were wrong. Acceptance is a neutral position. It's saying, because there's so much that is connected to everything. Everything is interconnected. You can't take one thing out and separate it and say that this was the reason why that. It may appear in your mind because you may have been conditioned to think that way. But patience, compassion, and acceptance are the three things that I would say that are mandatory, foundational in any type of relationship that you're going to have. Everybody's at different stages of their unfoldment. Some people, it may seem like they're going backwards. Some people may seem like they're just stagnant. Some people may be accelerating at a faster pace, because we all are doing it at different levels, different stages, and at different rates. So there is a connection between your ability to have compassion and patience with the level of consciousness that you're on. So you have to think about working on yourself just as your mate is working on herself. And understand that it is not, if the love and the connection, you need to really strive for a connection, not just through physical intimacy, even though that's very important. There's an emotional connection, there's a connection at different levels that you need to align with, because if you're only connecting at one level, the strands are not enough to keep the cord. I think there's I think it's in Ecclesiastes in the Bible, not 4:12, where it says if you got three cords, one or two is not going to do it, but if you got three of them intertwined, it makes it very strong. So I'm talking about the three different levels or three different aspects that will cause this tie or this connection to be that much stronger. And those things that I'm talking about are patience, compassion, and understanding. And that we're going to be everybody's not going to be growing at the same time or at the same rate. So if you are genuine in your love for your mate, if you are genuine, if you're not genuine, leave her alone and let her grow and develop and align with the divine feminine within her. Leave her alone. If you have not if you are not open to doing the work, or if you haven't, be man enough to let her flower, blossom, and prosper.
That's good.
If she was meant for you, okay, then at some point, maybe it will be for you. But men grow up, okay? Grow up and understand that you have to put in the work, because sisters are not playing around with their work.
Right. That's true.
They're not playing around with it. It's no game. So if you really want to, and to have someone that puts that type of time and effort into their growth, man, that's something you don't want to lose.
Exactly.
Man, you don't want, if anything, you want to nourish that, because trust in the process. If they know that you are supporting and nourishing them, it doesn't matter how much of, what you may do or may not do. Going back to those 5 languages, love language and all that kind of type of stuff, whether it's what you're saying or gifting, or it will transcend all of that, because they will know that even in her growth, and you're still not even on that trajectory, that you poured into her to allow her to become that lotus, that blossom into the divine femininity.
Wow. Yeah.
Cats got to grow up, man. I mean, I'm just going to put it, you do like Bobby might say, man, you just got to grow the hell up.
Yeah. That is so true.
I mean, it really is. I mean, either you're going to want to be in a relationship that grows and develops, not just because there's a difference between those that are doing the inner work and just those sisters that are just kind of moving along in belief systems and things of this nature. And I'm not trying to degrade anyone. That's, I mean, the churches are there for a reason. It's a kindergarten of consciousness. Okay, so when you're ready to grow up, then you can leave them and go where you need to go. But men, we have to realize that we have to pour into them, and support and nourish, and that takes patience. Compassion and acceptance. And you're not going to get played by someone, by a sister that is doing the inner work.
Right. I was just going to say, everything that you just said completely resonates with me. The more that I support Cam, is supportive, helpful, I watch her blossom more and more and more. But the thing about it is, I'm not the type of person that I just want to, when I pour into you and I see how well it's doing for you and how much you're developing and growing, I want some of that too. So it puts me in the place of, I gotta level up. I gotta be doing the exact. I gotta be doing the exact. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right.
So to me, that's what it does, and that's what it'll do twofold. You know what I'm saying? As you're being supportive of your mate, but you're also seeing the manifestations that are occurring, and so it puts us in a as men, it puts us in a place of, okay, all right. So if the divine feminine is able to do these things and accomplish this work, then as a divine masculine, as a counterpart, I can do it as well.
That's absolutely correct. And sometimes in the relationships, sometimes the men have done further along with the inner work, and sometimes it's the female. So,
right.
But everything operates within relationship, and you cannot get outside of relationship. As much as you might want to think that you can isolate yourself. So when you have a much better understanding of these things, you will put into it and you won't worry about it, because ultimately all of what you put out, it will return back to you.
Yeah.
Any loving energy, any supportive energy, trust the process that it will come back to you. As long as your intentions are good, and that your intentions are good, then everything is all good. And you don't have to worry about where, you don't keep track of where you think one is in relation to the other with regards to growth, because that's going to happen, and we grow in different ways, rates, stages, and things of that nature. The most important is the support. Mm-hmm. And if you pour into her, and if she's doing her inner work, she will value that and will not leave your side.
Awesome. Well, that wow, so much. Y'all see right here, this is the Functionary. This is a massive collection of information that Dr. Blynd has put together. Y'all need to get this book. For lack of better words, you need to get this book. This is a definite must-have. He called it a manual for life. And just since we've gotten the excerpts and had the book, it has really opened our minds up in more ways, and opened up our understanding in more ways. And so, Dr. Blynd, would you share how they could get the book?
Sure.
We did put it on the website, but now that we have you on and we have a few people that are definitely interested in attaining the book, you go ahead and share where they can get in touch with you.
Sure. Okay. All right. So there are a couple of ways. There is, well, you can contact me directly, 240-447-6146. That's 240-447-6146. You can email me at Dr. Blynd at Yahoo. That's DRBLYND at Yahoo. Dr. Blynd at yahoo.com. And you can go to the Facebook page, the Functionary Facebook page, and but I will even there will kind of direct you either to give me a call or to email me. So if you want to, you can bypass that. You got my number directly, and you can reach me there. I'll be getting a website up probably within another month or two. Got a lot of things on my plate. I had it up a long time ago. But anyway, yeah. So I like to look at the Functionary as like a literary companion for life. You know, it's liberation lifestyle. Is what I call it. And so, it has enough information and insights and tools and things. The more that you read it, the more equipped you'll be able to get out of it. And I mean, I appreciate the positive comments on it, and I mean, it's something that can be very instrumental in your own spiritual unfoldment and your own sacred journey to the nature of self.
Yeah. Also, one other thing, if there was anyone that have cashed app Dr. Blynd for the book already, please email him at the email that he just gave. Email him and let him know that you cashed out him. Maybe even share the screenshot so he can see it and have all of your information, and can communicate with you from that point. Other than that, man, it has been an honor and a privilege to be able to just share with you, Dr. Blynd.
Oh man, it's been my honor, man. I mean, my pleasure as well.
Yeah. I think that's it, Cam.
That's it. I just want to say thank you, and that we're definitely, if you're up for part 2 or 3 or whatever it takes, we're up for it as well, because we're just scraping the surface. And I think that this generation probably was a generation that had sold contracts to have this interface with you. I don't believe our parents and grandparents can even handle this.
We were just talking about that.
Yeah. So this is definitely seeming to be a generational thing, where this is what we are here to do. And so that's why as soon as we read it, it was just natural.
It's the wind
It was
street.
organic.
We bridging those gaps, aren't we?
Yeah. You know, so I just want to thank you and extend our platform to you anytime.
Oh yes.
Once you get the more the economic portion, the one about money, up and going, we're going to support you always, and so you can always use our platform to reach people. Yes, and I just want to say, you know, we really appreciate you. And one last thing that we want to make sure that we address. You go ahead, babe. You got the radio voice.
Oh, I got the radio voice.
You was Dr. Blynd.
Yeah.
I want to hear you say something about after dark. Okay, go ahead.
Well, here you said, Dr. Blynd, only you can transform and save yourself. So by all means, free your mind and watch your ass before the afterthought police state comes to pass.
Man, I'm gonna tell you, that was yeah.
And look, now that we on the curfews and got to get home and shit by 7 o'clock before we get locked up, you see how real you just was so ahead of the time.
You was ahead.
Man,
of the time.
I saw it coming as clear as daylight.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Can't wait for part 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm most definitely. I appreciate you and all of your, your tribe, your listeners, for taking the time for us to build at this point. And I enjoy it, and I don't do it that often, as you know. But it's time now for those that are. And see, in the past, I had to try to get to people to make them understand why it is important to do what you all already know now. So I got to the point where I was like, you know what? Now I'm just going to write. I'm not even going to worry about it. And whenever those that are ready, then it'll be there. And that's the way that. So your point was very prescient, Cam.
Yeah.
Ashe.
Well, hold for a second, Dr. Blynd. Well, we thank you all, everybody that has sat and listened with us. Definitely be looking out for the upload. We're gonna share it on the platforms, YouTube and IGTV. And we love y'all. We appreciate y'all. Thank you for all the continued support. And just stay tuned, y'all. We're going to be presenting more and more relevant information that is going to help us continue to awake and continue to level up on this soul journey. With that being said, y'all know what it is. Man, your third eye has just been kissed. Peace.
I love it. That is so awesome.